Welcome to the Church Leadership Podcast, where we are all about encouraging and equipping local church leaders to be disciples who make disciples. With your hosts, Mark Gainey and Andy Frazier. In each episode, Andy and Mark have authentic conversations that help you grow as you lead the local church. Thanks for joining the podcast, and be sure to subscribe to the show. Here is today's episode.
Welcome to this episode of the Church Leadership Podcast. We are glad you are watching or listening to this episode. And just like we do in every conversation on the podcast, we really do believe and we're aiming to encourage and equip you to lead in the local church, to be a disciple that makes disciples. And we have got one of our great friends with us for an awesome conversation ahead. And we can't wait to get this thing started, Andy.
Yeah, we're so happy to have our great friend, Dr. Robert Mullins, with us today. Robert serves as the executive director for the Madison Baptist Association in North Alabama, and the Lord's doing some great things there in those churches as he's serving pastors and equipping churches and just doing some great things. But I just want to start this episode out by thanking God for our friendship with Robert. As a matter of fact, the reason Mark and I know each other is because God used Robert's network of connections and relationships to put Mark and me in the same room at the same time, which we had been in the same room at the same time, but to make sure we were around each other and got to know each other. So, Robert, we're so glad you're here. We're so excited to hear about what God's doing in your ministry and in your life. And wow, things are happening. And we want to talk about some interesting things that we feel like you have great insight to, but also some things that might be right where people are in serving in local church right now. So thank you for being here with us today.
Oh man, I'm so excited. So is that throwing me under the bus for connecting the two of you? Or is that
Absolutely not.
Do I need to run and hide? Are there people that are going to come after me now? No, man. Wow. I think about stuff like that and we have a relationship. And I think that's at the end of the day, what is the most valuable thing that we have on earth. And whether it's stories of meals together or Andy, one time you came down and sat at my staff meeting and just played like part of our church team. And then Mark, we've been down the road. My church team stopped in at your church to get coffee and just on the way we were going somewhere. And so that's the cool thing about this relationship is it's miles behind us, but I think it's miles ahead of us too. And it's pretty cool how God does that.
It is amazing how God does that. We are certainly thankful for you.
Yeah.
And we're glad you joined us again. You've been a multiple offender here on the Church Leadership Podcast. And so we're glad you're back. So here's what I want us to start talking about, Robert.
And I am fully clothed for the record. So.
Yeah. The early episode with Larry Heisch.
Yeah, that's right.
That's good. Since I think the last time that you were on, you were still a pastor of a local church. I could be wrong about that, but you've had a major transition personally, ministerially. So now your role has changed. Your work is different, involves some of the same things. So I want to ask a two-part question. Okay.
Sure.
And so I want you to talk a little bit about the difference that you have seen between pastoring and then also leading a network of pastors or an association of pastors. We'll start there. Let's just talk about that. The difference that you've had to adjust. And the reason I'm asking that is may not be a whole lot of listeners or watchers who are going to make that transition, but all of us make ministry transitions, and how we navigate those transitions. Really, it doesn't matter what role we're in, those transitions always have to be navigated. And so I want to hear your thoughts on your transition in that.
So 2023 September was when I officially made the move from the local church, being a pastor, senior pastor of 11 years at this one church. Prior to that, I was 22 years as a youth pastor, a youth minister. And at this one church, I left and I came here to the role of executive director, association mission strategist, director of missions, whatever people call this title. For here, I'm in downtown Huntsville. It's a highly executive type or culture. So for us to use the phrase executive director, associate director, those things for our staff members made a lot of sense for the community that we're in. So that was part of the change. The other change was that God really gave me a narrowed focus on what our role is. We were talking about before the podcast, we were talking about AI a little bit. And I've done some extensive research on the Apostle Paul in this role. And so one of the things that I've found is that he really only connected one, I'm just going to say one, but maybe even two mission trips along the way. So historically, this job has been about, hey, can you get a good mission trip for our church and lead us to do that or whatever? But according to what Paul did, he really did two things to strengthen the church. And number one was the most important thing that he did was to try to create an atmosphere and environment for pastors to become healthy. Okay. And so anything that he could do to see pastors become healthy, pastoring pastors, networking pastors, all those things, that's what he did. And then he created avenues for churches to work on mission and ministry together in their community. And so those are the two things that we've tried to do. The good news for me was that I was doing it through, you guys know about Passion Tree. And so that was a normal step that we were doing some of the healthy pastor stuff. Like we noticed, okay, and I think this answers your question. We noticed that pastors were burning out, okay? COVID hit them square in the head and pushed some of them off that edge of, hey, I'm done here. How many pastors 3 and 4 years ago stood up in the pulpit and just said, I'm done. Like today is my last day. And they walked out without money, without jobs, without whatever. And all that was gone. But it was more important for them to have their sanity and to be able to navigate the next steps in their life than to just completely burn out and disappear. That's been a process of change in the local church. And this is the way I've put it before, is that we're not meant to be on an island. Okay. So for example, you could argue and say, hey, I'm an introvert. I'm a pastor that's introverted. Okay, great. But you have to learn how to do some things that might not be in your wheelhouse, but that you really do need. And one of those is relationships. You really need relationships with other pastors. And so that's the thing where the association, particularly a director or leader or even pastor, that's to the level that I am, is that I've said the phrase that I'm going to be a pastor to pastors. Okay. By saying that, it may sound a little arrogant or, wow, who are you to say that or whatever. But the reality is when I say that to a pastor who is struggling, who is needing an office, it doesn't matter what size their church is. I've had mega church pastors sit in my office for 2 and 3 hours. I've had very small church pastors sit in my office or go to lunch for hours and hours. The deal is we have an opportunity in association work to be a moment of respite, a moment of just rest, refreshing for those pastors to come in. And that's what we've tried to do here. We literally have tried to create an environment that you can come in and get a cup of coffee. You can sit by yourself in it. We've got a reading room. We've got a study room. We've got all these things that are just geared toward the pastor's health. We literally take our pastors on hikes. We're trying to really refresh them, body, spirit, and mind, because we think, and this is the goal, to have healthy pastors gives us thriving churches. And so that's our twofold goal in the association work, is to do that. And we've seen it unfolding for a while. But what we've done, and this is what I really feel for the rest of my time in ministry, that God has narrowed my focus to try to help pastors become healthy and help churches thrive.
I don't think this is a new concept.
No.
I think that this age is old, and it goes back literally to first century church. Robert, just the reality of ministry is hard. And if you're doing it well, you're going to be working and giving and serving and pouring out. And we need someone as pastors who will encourage us and pour into us. And you can't, that old adage is true. You can't pour out of an empty cup. So we need to be poured into. So your association is becoming better equipped to do that. You're learning constantly ways that the association can equip and encourage pastors to become healthier. And as you mentioned, healthy pastors tend to pastor healthier churches. Healthy churches sometimes who call an unhealthy pastor end up becoming, unfortunately, an unhealthy church because of the pastoral leadership. So, and like Mark mentioned earlier, your transition from student ministry to senior pastor to now ministry on the associational level. What are you seeing now that maybe you didn't catch serving in the second chair or serving as the lead guy in the local church? What are you seeing now that maybe your eyes are being open to, that you're aware of, that would prove to be helpful? If you could go back and tell Robert Mullins of 10 years ago or 20 years
Yeah.
ago, hey, you need to focus on this. Here's some areas you need to watch out for. What are some things that you feel like have just opened your eyes to see things in a different way, being in the role you are now versus in leadership in the local church?
Well, obviously, the go-to answer is going to be every pastor is busy, right?
Mhm.
You're busy. I get it. Every pastor's busy. But that does not ever negate the needs that you still have. Okay. You may be filling those needs. You may be filling those voids with busy, right? You may be doing something that you feel is urgent or important. But sometimes the best thing that we could do would probably be say no to something that might be urgent so that we could fit something that is needed. Okay. And I think one of the big things, if I were to go back, I would say that I would intentionally make relationships with other pastors more of a priority. Now, that may sound really silly for me because you guys know that I have an organization. We have pastors all over the country, literally, and I'm on the phone all day with pastors. But if I were gut level honest, locally, as I was serving as a senior pastor, I had a few favorites, and that's who I hung out with. When in reality, there were some things that were probably missing from myself, my church, because the person and the church maybe that was going to fill it was from this other place across our county that we needed to connect on a regular, point in time. And so the good news for us, especially as Baptists, is we have associations and we have the opportunities to do this. And so I think just looking back on it, I would say this, that so I've always been involved in association work. I will say that as a lead pastor, there are some things that I've known that I wish that I knew then what I know now. Because you can get so busy, especially if you're in a quasi-healthy place. If your church feels good and it's healthy and you think God's doing these work here and everything like that, you can ignore the invitation to go to a thing, or you can go, I'm working on my sermon today instead of going to that monthly meeting or whatever it is like that. And I can tell you that what we've seen here is when these men have prioritized the gathering together with other brother pastors, it has just changed their life. And I mean that significantly impacted, not just going on a trip annually together or a random conference together, but a regular relationship where we've seen those things happen where they are uplifted and they've said things like this. I just didn't know that this existed in our area. I didn't know that I had this opportunity. And they also know what we're doing, that it's new. They know that we've changed the game. But sometimes, and y'all know this too, like we had to dissolve things that were going. Like we had to dissolve some ministry and some things that were programming, that sort of stuff. We had a pastors conference that was 2 times a month, and it was very poorly attended by our active pastors. There were some retired pastors a part of it. And so we scrapped everything and started over. And we created a model that on the first Thursday, we ask our pastors to carve out time to come together. And then after that, we go to lunch together. And there's usually a training and encouraging moment, worship moment, those sorts of things, to where we can come in, let your guard down, and just be for a little while, but very intentional on the relational part. So I think that's helped where we see the future going as well, because a lot of things that are going to happen in the future, whether we want them to or not. I heard a church today, another church in Alabama merging with another church, and things like church mergers are going to be the norm in the future. So that means if you got 2 churches and 2 pastors, you're potentially only going to have 1 church and 1 pastor. What happens to the other one? Okay. So we're answering some of those questions, and we're trying to figure out how to help in these things. But those are the days ahead, and we're trying to create the space. And I think that's important. Creating the space, creating the environment. Status quo doesn't work. And if I go and speak at a conference of other associational leaders and I say, yeah, I had an intern here when I first got here that said, what's up with the funeral home vibes? Okay. And in the room, most of the associational guys go, hey, that's my office you're talking about. And I'm like going, then get some paint, man. Okay. If the local library can do it, if the theaters can do it, if, the restaurants are renovating, but yet our associational offices are not friendly and where people want to be, then how can you expect for people to come? And how can you expect for them to come literally and go, hey, is it okay if I study here today? One of the first moves we did was we built one of our churches caught the vision, and we built a coffee shop area, so much to say that we had some girls come into our office one day, young professionals like in their early 20s, saying, hey, we Googled coffee shop and it brought us here. And so John, my associate, John Hathcock, he became barista for the day, right? And he made some coffee and shared Jesus with these girls. And because we're creating environment for pastors to feel like they can be connected to each other. And that's critically important. And it's awesome because we'll have some pastors just come in, get coffee and go to the back. And they're like together. They've made plans. Instead of go to Starbucks, let's come here and hang out for a while. And so it's good. But you have to be intentional to create those kind of spaces.
Yes, you do. And you're good at that. So we've talked about it before a little bit here around it, but in addition to your role there, you're also the founder and executive director of Passion Tree Ministries. And the whole goal of Passion Tree is to create those spaces and places where pastors can heal, where they can connect, where they can be encouraged. We may talk a little bit more about that. So we may revisit that, but we'll put links to all those things in the show notes there. But I wanted to ask you this, because what I've seen in the last 2 years, started with you actually, in our state specifically in Alabama, I've seen God strategically place people in certain roles, whether they be churches or like you in an association or a network of churches. And I really believe God is trying to, it seems to me at least, God's trying to do something there to help these associations become disciple-making ecosystems, if you will, not just what we've always done.
Yeah.
So how do you think that can happen? What does that look like for networks of churches, associations to become this ecosystem of disciple-making?
Sure. We all agree on this. It starts at the top, right? And so if I say, hey, we're gonna be a disciple-making culture here. Okay. But yet I'm not making disciples. It doesn't add up. I still have I didn't wear this just for today, guys. Who are you discipling, Brace?
Way discipling, yes.
Thanks, Larry. It's real to me. I love you guys. Okay. I can't say it enough. I love you. But I'm not accountable to you in regards to who are you discipling, Robert? I'm accountable to God. Like I'm accountable to Jesus. Am I accountable to you? Yes, I am accountable to you. We're brothers in Christ. Okay. And we do have the opportunity, responsibility to walk up to each other and say, hey, who are you discipling? All right. But at the end of the day, I'm not real worried about what Mark Gainey says about me or Andy Fraser says about me. I am worried about what God the Father says about me. Let me just say that for a record. Okay. I want one day to hear those words that you want to hear. Well done, my good and faithful servant. And the only way for me to do that is to be responsible for what I know. All right. And what I know is He's called me to be a disciple maker. And so I get real excited about, and I'm probably a unique one on this one, and not different from you guys because you have a similar call, but I get really excited about discipling pastors that haven't been discipled. Okay. And it's a really unique environment. I would say it's even a unique calling that we get this opportunity to do that. And when a pastor is hungry or wants to be discipled and they call you and say, hey, could you disciple me? That's so awesome. And we just finished a Zoom huddle that we had some guys, probably 10 or so guys, probably 3 or 4 were probably 3 were out of state and everybody else was in Alabama, probably 4 or 5 right here in Huntsville. And one guy heard that was going on, and 2 months before we're finishing, he's like, hey, can I get on? And so we added a new guy, and then he's going to go with me when I multiply in January. And so we're starting new groups and all that good stuff. And then I've been praying a lot about the idea of, and y'all know this on my take on discipleship in general. But so I had this idea that you leverage everything that you have to make disciples. And I've put it like this, that there's formal or informal disciple making, there's structured or unstructured. It's however you want to technically call it. And so as I've been trying to write and create maybe a document, a book, whatever, that will help people get that, it also plays out in stories. And I think it's really important for pastors to have the environment to come together to create that. The association has the opportunity, and I even think responsibility, to try to say, okay, what did Jesus tell us to do? All right. These are these bare minimum things that he told us to do. Disciple making is always going to be on the top of that list. I even go so far, and as an association leader, I get to preach in lots of pulpits. And I haven't been pitched for and the fire coming at me yet, but I love to say, did Jesus say get saved? Because that's what most of our churches are teaching, get saved, get saved, get saved, which is important to be saved, right? But the process is discipleship to get saved. And that's what Jesus taught us so much. So by having these opportunities that guys like myself or Eric Taylor or Kevin Blackwell or Chris Crane, that we have to go into these churches and be somebody who gets to hold up Moses' arms for a Sunday morning and say, hey, let's go and make disciples. Let's go and do this. And our churches are going to hear us do this. If you come through our building, you're going to see a poster that one of our main tenets is, we're going to be disciples that make disciples. And it says it right there. It's clear as the words. And because that is our litmus test. That's what will be measured on. And so if that's the case, then whether it's a conglomeration of churches through networking or associational work, or the individual church, I think that we can strengthen that process. Does that make sense?
Oh, makes a lot of sense, Robert. And I think all this kind of, for me, ties together in what you've been through, what you're doing, and what you feel like God's leading you to do is going to help a lot of pastors and a lot of churches, not just in your area, but the ripple effect. Those churches and those pastors will help other churches and other pastors. And that's what we want ultimately. Let me ask you this. I don't know how much time we have left, and this may be one of the last things we kind of dive in on. Based on what we've talked about today, not just your role in helping churches, not just your passion for making disciples and networking people together, but one of the things you mentioned earlier was COVID. We saw a massive rate of discouragement and even burnout. What are you finding right now? What do you feel like is maybe the next area of ministry for the association or even the local church in ministering to their staff and key leaders and helping in longevity to keep from burnout? What's the long game look like investing in church leaders and pastors to help them keep going and remain faithful?
The most overused word is the word that we use all the time. And I think it's starting to do this. Okay. It wasn't at first because we'd say it and it sounds really important. Like we got to pay attention to it, but I'm afraid it may start doing this, and that's intentionality. Okay. So the leader has to be intentional in what we're doing, meaning I had a pastor one time say something from the pulpit that just was shocking to me. Said, don't worry about what other people think about you because they don't do it that much. And I was like, I am just a weirdo because I think about people all the time. Okay. And particularly those I pastor or lead or in this role, I'm thinking about pastors all the time. I can't even tell. It's the weirdest thing. And Andy, you were there early on in the call. You were literally at the moment, my little burning bush moment, where God said, you're going to pastor pastors full time. And I'm like, how do you do that? Like, how do you actually support your family and do that? And God made this way. But the reality is it's very intentional, meaning that people in the role, even other pastors, okay, if you're a shepherd and a pastor and you're in relationship with these people and they cross your mind, my encouragement is text them, call them. There's a reason they've crossed your mind. Okay. Go ahead immediately and do that. And I can't tell you how many times I've made phone calls in the car on the way home or just text messages in the morning early that somebody's on my heart, just left a message with somebody. Hey, I just want you to know I'm praying for you today. You're just on my mind today. And every time, guys, and y'all know this, they'll call you back and say, you don't know what I was going through at that moment. You don't know how important that was. Y'all probably done that with me. And I've called you and said, Mark, you have no idea how your prayer just really lifted me up. And y'all, here's the reason why that's so important. There are pastors and leaders on islands, and they choose to be that way. They've got hurt, they've got life, they've got stuff. There's a pastor that I know that is leaving their church and leaving their association and going into whatever they're going into. But they did this with the people trying to get in. And I would say, first of all, don't say that you're lonely and you're afraid and you're hurting and nobody cares if you're doing this. Okay. If you're doing this, you'll get a phone call from me. You'll get some encouragement from me. But at some point, I just can't get in because of this. Okay.
He's putting his hands up. For those of you listening.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought we were
like hands off. Okay,
yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Your hands out. Okay. You can't get into this barricade that I'm building. And so many people do that with their actions, attitudes, and words. And I think you have to be willing to be vulnerable and trust people again. First of all, there's also this other thing in our culture that basically says you're in charge. And I would say this to you, pastor, if God has called you to be a pastor, you are not in charge. He is. So you do have a choice. You can be disobedient or obedient. You can either say, God, whatever you want me to do, I'll do. I'll open-handed, here I go. Let's do this. Or you can say, not today, Lord, I'm not going to do that. I'll just keep singing these songs on Sunday and I'll go over here and work over here and do this thing. Burnout's real. Okay. So don't hear me wrong. If you need help, I'm telling you right now, you can look us up on passiontree.org and we can get you to counselors. We can get you to stuff. You can look madisonbaptist.org. Here I am. Call me, please. Okay. Because I don't want you, if you're in Texas and you're about to burn out and make a bad decision for you and your family, please call me today. I'm not kidding. It's not a joke. Because of a calling, yes. But there's also something else too. We're in this together.
Amen.
Like we're really in this together, and I'm no better than you, and you are no better than me, and we are walking together, and there's nothing like brothers in arms. Okay. And I say that specifically. I know there's a lot of people that are not pastors listening to this podcast, but if you know a pastor that's hurting, please tell them to get some help, because isolation is real. Loneliness is real. And when you go down the holes of that, burnout's only the beginning of the pain, because then it can go to really bad places and really dark places. And so if you're ever contemplating hurting yourself, committing suicide, anything like that, please reach out. And I know, Mark, you've got show notes and stuff, but please reach out because it's just not worth those eternal, long time, significant things for temporary issues. And so there are a lot of people that want to help you.
And I think that is a good way to close out, because Andy and I, we were talking with somebody else earlier today about the time of year and how challenging it can be. And there's probably somebody watching or listening, whether they're pastor, staff member, church leader, who is feeling like they're drowning. And said, Robert, don't do this alone. Don't do it by yourself. Need a cautionary tale? Go back to the first couple of episodes and hear my story, and how you can hear what happens when you try to do it on your own. And Robert, thank you so much, man. It's always an encouragement. That is obviously one of your gifts. And we know that your passion and your calling is to pastor pastors, but also to create places and spaces to connect and to heal. And you've helped both Andy and I do that over the years. And I know you help countless people do that. So thank you. Thank you for joining us today. And
man, what an honor. Thank y'all. Thank you. And I love you guys the same. Y'all have helped me. So there we go.
We do love you.
Robert, Mark and I have been encouraged through our conversation today. And we know those who are watching and listening have been encouraged and helped to be better disciples of Jesus and better leaders in the local church, to go and do what Jesus has called us to do, and to lead healthy churches and to make and multiply disciples. So We appreciate your time. We appreciate your work that you do, and we love you too, brother.
Thank you.
All right. And for the rest of you guys, we will see you next time.
Thanks for joining in. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss a single episode. Help us spread the word about the podcast by sharing on socials too. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.